Benedict XVI's influence has traveled around the world, including the United States. His vast theological work unpacked truth, guided by sound Catholic doctrine, but it was all rooted in a profound love of Jesus Christ. And that understanding of faith leaves a legacy within the U.S. Church among the clergy inspired by him.
He very much formed my mind. He very much formed the mind of those who were with me in seminary, even prior to our entrance, but certainly while we were there.
Ordained in 2016, Father Joseph Rampino is a priest for the Diocese of Arlington, Virginia. He says Pope Benedict's theological perspectives are attractive because they are focused on knowing Jesus authentically.
There's just such an intense desire to see Christ as he is, to see Christ on his own terms rather than on my terms or on our human terms.
As a theological influence and as a teacher on the current clergy of the United States, and particularly the younger generations, I think he's had a tremendous influence.
For more than a decade, Stephen White has focused his work on the intersection of Catholicism with culture and politics in the U.S. Executive Director of the Catholic Project at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., White believes the experience shared by Father Rampino is common among young priests in the U.S. and those currently formed in seminaries.
In the last 10 or 15 years especially, I think you'll find among them the kind of people who really responded well to Pope Benedict.
His impact can also be felt among the U.S. clergy he appointed, like Archbishop Emeritus Joseph Kurtz, who knew Pope Benedict to be a brilliant theologian, but also a man with a humble spirit.
People have said often that he spoke because of his intellect with such clarity, but I would add that he spoke with clarity without a hint of arrogance.
In 2007, Kurtz was appointed Archbishop of Louisville, Kentucky by Pope Benedict, but he'd gotten to know him before that at the Vatican as Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith.
He shook everybody's hand and asked us our name and where we're from. We sat down, and I always remember he said, now I have some things that I would like to say if there is time. However, first, I'd like to hear if you have any questions. So he was just a gentleman.
I found him to be delightful, intelligent, humorous, and really engaged with us.
Diane Starkovich, the superintendent of Catholic schools in Atlanta, will never forget when she saw Pope Benedict up close. In 2008, Pope Benedict came to the U.S., visiting New York City and Washington, D.C., and he made a stop here at the Catholic University of America to discuss the role of the Church in education. Starkovich gathered with hundreds of Catholic school educators from around the country to hear from the Pope.
Challenged us, be true to our mission, be authentic, be Catholic. Don't forget prayer.
Pope Benedict even left his mark on U.S. politics, meeting presidents during his papacy and then Vice President Joe Biden, who reflected on that visit earlier this year.
And we had a long conversation. He's a great theologian, a very conservative theologian.
Stephen White says though the teachings of popes throughout history aren't focused on political matters, he finds continuity between the writings of Pope St. John Paul II, Benedict, and Francis when it comes to issues that influence U.S. politics.
Yes, there have been different points of emphasis. But if you want to read about the importance of ecology, you can find it in Benedict and Francis. If you want to read about the importance of defending life from conception to natural death, you find that in John Paul II, and you'll find it in Francis.
During his U.S. visit, Pope Benedict stopped at the White House and met with President George W. Bush, who applauded the Pope's defense of unborn children.
In a world where some treat life as something to be debased and discarded, we need your message that all human life is sacred, and that each of us is willed, each of us is loved.
In Washington, D.C. and in New York, Pope Benedict acknowledged reports of clergy sex abuse in the U.S. and the pain it had caused.
His record stands on handling child sexual abuse, both here in the United States and globally.
As Executive Director of the Catholic Project, Stephen White's work now focuses on responding to clergy sex abuse in the U.S. White says though his record addressing abuse was not perfect, Pope Benedict moved the Church in the right direction, doing far, far more good than bad, removing a high number of priests from ministry before and during his papacy.
Probably personally handled more sex abuse cases and laicized more priests who were abusers than anyone else in history.
As the legacy of Pope Benedict is realized in the U.S., it could take many years to understand the full impact. But Father Rampino encourages people to get to know the late Pope now through his writings.
He took the Christian truth to which he was faithful out of a great love for God, and he spoke it clearly. He spoke it in a way that was inspiring as well, and he spoke it in a way that was credible.
And for those following the papacy of Pope Francis, Archbishop Emeritus Joseph Kurtz says a link to Benedict can be found through a focus on Christ.
So much of what I think Pope Francis began with was a continuation of the spirit of Benedict, which was really the spirit of Jesus.
Mark Irons, EWTN News in Depth.